Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinars today. My name is Aarti Chauhan, and I manage the software donation program here at Nasscom Foundation. I have Mahendra and Nitin with me from the BigTech team. So we'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All the lines are muted, so if you have any technical issue throughout the session, please type it into the chat box, which is on your webinar panel. Also, if you have any questions during the session, please type it into the Q&A box. If you are on the Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and the video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you with the best experience. Please note this webinar is being recorded and the link of the recording will be available on the Nasscom Foundation YouTube page. Now, I would like to give an overview about Nasscom Foundation and BigTech. Over to you, Mahendra.
All right, thanks, Ati. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be talking about open source and how open source can, help the organizations to look at some solutions and technologies and tools which they can adopt. To start off with, just to have a quick background about what we are and who we are. So, about Foundation, we have been in this industry for the last 20 years, and our vision is to leverage technology to create an inclusive and progressive India. The way we look at some of the programs in the foundation is we have key five interventions where we work. And to start off with, the first one is the women entrepreneurship, where we work with the women to look at from an entrepreneurship journey and how we can take it forward. Looking at the second one, which is digital literacy, looking at some of the skills which is required. And also the next one is the skilling and employability. So how do we look at employability and how do we look at upskilling some of the tier two, tier three cities? And then moving on, we have BigTech. BigTech is where we work with NGOs looking at various avenues and various opportunities to engage with NGOs. And apart from that, we also work on the software donation program. We also work on social innovation. Social innovation is primarily working with students, startups, looking at various initiatives in terms of climate tech, anything which is related to technology aspects. So that's where we look at social innovation, and primarily they work a lot with the startups. Moving on. Uh, yeah. So, what do we do at NGO empowerment, right? So, like I mentioned, NGO empowerment primarily focuses on digital and tech capability programs. And the way we look at this is typically, scaling and looking at intensifying the outreach. And the way we do it is, through tech-based solutions, volunteering, and software donations. And how do we look at engaging the NGOs? We run at various programs, maybe like webinars, maybe seminars, workshops, some of the in-person sessions also where we kind of engage with the NGO community. Moving on, what we have seen from an NGO's perspective, whenever we go talk to NGOs or when we get some trying to get some feedback, we listed few of the challenges which we think NGOs face because every NGO has a different journey which they are in, like a small grassroots level to a medium or a large, right? Primarily, we see that these are a lot of challenges which are evolving around. So to start off with, I think some of the NGOs say that they lack capacity to manage their donors and partners, and some of them say that they don't have a standard, testing tools to measure and monitor some of the performances and the projects and programs which you are running. And some of them say that they don't have a data or information where they can consolidate as a tool or something which can give them some good insights, right? And some also lack the capacity to research and look at how they can take it forward from a capability programs in terms of doing some projects. And at a certain point after the NGOs kind of reach to a certain stage, they also face some difficulties in terms of scaling up the organization programs and projects. And some say that they lack technology and looking at from a perspective of maximizing efficiency and impact, right? And to look at these challenges, what we do, right? So BigTech is a program which we have launched. It's been almost like 13 years that we have launched this program, and we have partnered with TechSoup. TechSoup is the only, TechSoup is a partner for us where they have global presence, and for India, we are the implementing partner, and we are the only platform in India where all the NGOs who are eligible can get these genuine softwares at an affordable price, right? Looking at from a program's perspective, what do we do under BigTech? The first program which we run is the software donation program, where we offer donations to the eligible organizations. And just to name some of these softwares like Quick Heal or AWS or a Box, right? So typically the organizations, the NGOs come shop on our big tech platform, and they go ahead and subscribe to the products, and we go ahead and fulfill those products and licenses, right? Validation services is the next program where typically the donors say that we will go ahead and fulfill the licenses on from their end. So we go ahead and make sure that the eligibility criteria of the NGOs are met, meaning the criteria of the document checklist, if everything is up to date, and the license fulfillment happen from the donor website perspective directly from there, right? The third program is the NGO source. NGO source is typically, it's a grant making process, which is the US grant making process. So we have equivalency determinations. So what we do is we check these equivalency determinations and see if everything is meeting as per the norms and regulations. And once we validate them, then the US grant making process will be successful, and that's the way the EDs will be. EDs will be processed through the NGO source program. Okay, moving on. Uh, uh, I think I touched on some of these things. So, what do we offer as big tech, right? So, what we understand as some of the problem statements is like, we understand NGOs have certain financial limitations, maybe to, invest in a hardware or a software, and some of the NGOs can't afford to hire a professional services and deploy the latest technology which is available in the market, and probably some of them might not even know what are the latest products which are available in the market which can help their respective organizations, right? And then we have always see there's a pirated threat where these pirated softwares which are there in the market which are really not reliable, and there's always a threat for the NGOs to be attacked by malwares or anything which is related to pirate, right? So, what do we do and what we bring as a solutions under big tech, right? So, we look at bringing affordable latest technology for the NGOs. We have the access to the various donated products which are available on our website. And we also look at, access to the community and the support, right? So how NGOs can get benefited out of it once they subscribe to these softwares which are relevant for the respective organizations, they can look at reaching to more beneficiaries and sponsors, improving the internal efficiencies, resource usage, and also market and brand themselves better. Um, so somebody is asking, there is a Q&A. So yeah, I think there will be a Q&A at the end of the session. So moving on, just to talk about, some of the donors who are listed on our platform. I think I just named few of them like, earlier. So Zoom, we have Dropbox, we have Cookie, we have Adobe. So these are some of the donors who are listed on our program. Apart from this, there are other donors also which are available, which you can always go ahead and explore. Moving on, just to talk about our journey in terms of what we have done so far. Just to give you a quick snapshot, we have donated worth rupees 1.6 billion, 1.69 billion worth of softwares to the NGO community so far. And because the NGOs have come to Big Tech and procured these products and subscribed to these softwares, they actually saved a lot of money. Had it been they gone to the market, that would have been costed them way higher. Because the NGOs came to big tech, they got saved almost 1.58 billion worth of money which we saved for the NGOs. Also to look at from a impact perspective, we almost have 2.5 million lives across India which got impacted and got benefited, and almost 13,000 plus NGOs who are available on our Big Tech program who are registered. In the bottom, what we're trying to say is, like I said, every NGO have a different journey, like a small NGO, whether it's a medium or a large. So what we're trying to say is, at every given point of time, the NGOs will require certain softwares which is helpful for the respective organization. So, may it be infrastructure related softwares which we have, like AWS. Dropbox, may it be like marketing and communications. We have softwares which are related to that. If an NGO is looking for a donor management, we have softwares which is relevant for the donor management. If an NGO is trying to improve their, security and backup and trying to, have certain checks in place, we also have softwares which are available which can help the NGOs. And end of the day, I think every NGO needs to run their operations. So some of the operation softwares which are available, which can help the NGOs to kind of run their daily operations more effectively and efficiently, right? So that's what a quick snapshot about our program. This slide. Just to give you some background, we have done a couple of surveys, which we have done with the NGOs in India. And the first survey which we have done is the capacity building program, which you can see as the first chart. And what we have done here is we have partnered with Info Exchange, who has been a partner. And we have come up with certain questions which are relevant for the capacity building of an NGOs, and we have rolled out to NGO community, and we got almost 478 participants who have participated in this survey. And some of the outcomes which came from that survey are really interesting. Just to talk about the top priorities from a technology perspective, what NGOs are saying is they want to improve their digital capabilities of the staff and their volunteers, and also looking at improving their website. And a few of them also say that they want to use better use of the social media and digital marketing, right? To the right hand side, you can see some of the stats, typically some of the numbers. What is interesting is WhatsApp is the number one channel for a lot of NGOs where they communicate, right? And some of the things which we are also looking at from perspective of how some of the NGOs are looking in terms of the adoption in terms of security. They have one-time passwords and a lot of things which are there, which is interesting facts which we actually receive from the NGOs, right? The second survey which we have done is typically understanding about what we are doing as a big tech program and how the NGOs are getting impacted through our big tech program. So the way we have done this is we have conducted interviews with 60 shortlisted NGOs on a random basis, and we try to understand like how the big tech program is helping them. At the same time, trying to see like what can be the next steps in terms of having any additional services or improving on some of the things, right? So some of the key facts which came out is 83% of the NGOs have witnessed increase in the outreach because they have come to the Big Tech program, and 98% of the NGOs reported improved operations and management, and 97% have reported decreased cost and expenses, which is very important because a lot of NGOs definitely look at improving their cost and reducing the expenses, right? So 97% of them said that because they came to BigTech, they have saved this, so which is very promising for us. And the right hand side, there's a quick snapshot which talks about how many beneficiary or NGOs are there. So it's like 24 of the NGOs are falling under 10,000 plus. So there's a breakup in terms of how many NGOs are falling under which category in terms of the number of beneficiaries which they're working on, right? So that's typically, the impact which we have created so far. And with that, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Vinay Venu. We are very glad to have him today because a lot of things that in the market is going around open source, and we thought that open source is very important and NGOs can definitely get benefited out of it. So we have an expert. Vinay is the co-founder of Samanvay Research and Development Foundation, and he's built a lot of open source products for the nonprofits, and some of the signature products which he has is the Bamni and Avni, which actually helps the digital public good. So welcome, Vinay, to today's webinar session, and over to you. Thank you.
A very good morning to everyone. My name is Vinay Venu. I work at Samanvay Foundation. And today I thought I'll give you a brief idea of my views on what, the why, and the how of open source for nonprofits. Now, before we get into open source itself, I wanted to give a brief idea of what we're going to talk about before the what's is about technology in an organization, and you'll see a graph here where this is about organizations trying to adopt technology and the kind of risks that organizations will have when they start adopting technology. In the short term, when you're starting off, the first problem would be, will this actually get adoption? Is this really worth doing? So what you really need to do is some kind of a pilot, right? Now, there are two kinds of things you could do. One is you can take a product. And when I mean a product, what I mean is something that has been used across more than one organization in the past. Like, for example, Gmail is a product. It's a software product that people can use. And it's been tried and tested in many places. In the NGO world, it will be slightly different in the sense that those products may not be tested as widely as Google is. But again, these things will vary from product to product. You could either build the whole thing from scratch for your organization, or you could or you could use something that's already available. Now, we are not making a differentiation between open source and closed source here. That will come up later. But in the short term, your problem is adoption. In the medium term, what you would need is slight modifications in your organizational structure. You might be expanding to a new state. You might be changing your program in between. So those are the kind of problems you'll face in the medium term. In the long term, what you will face is whether your technology is still relevant or not. All technology keeps changing over time, and what you use today will not even be compatible with the kind of hardware and the software that's available 10 years from now. The kind of technologies that you'll need to be using will also change. For example, you'd be in 2010, somebody will be building a web application, and suddenly mobile would be the new craze, and you would actually need to start building a mobile app. And products are usually better in this sense because it's being used by multiple people, and the problems are common across. And because of that, products usually tend to have a better bang for the buck, at least in the short term and the long term. In the short term, it makes things easy because you can pilot things at low cost. And in the long term, they keep evolving because many customers would also need it. So it keeps evolving, and you would have what you need 10 years from now if you go with a product. And in the nonprofit space, especially, I am a very strong advocate of using products as much as possible over custom built solutions. And during this talk, I will mainly be talking only about products. That's the reason for this slide. With that precursor, let's go ahead with the discussion. Again, let me remind you, I was going to talk about the what, the why, and the how of open source. Now, what is open source? On this screen, you would see two pictures. On the left, you see a building, and on the right side is somebody drawing up how to make that building. The building itself is your solution or what you really need to perform your activities. And on the right side is the blueprint for it. Now, in the software world, it doesn't cost too much to take what you've drawn and actually make that building, unlike the world of construction. And what you do when you draw and make that blueprint is what open source or is the source code of it. So on the top you have the solution, and then you have the source code. Now companies who make software can either choose to not give the source code and instead just give the building to you or the final finished solution to you, or they can also choose to give the source code so that you can look at it, you can modify it for your own purposes if you want to, and you can even inspect it and see what's going on, and you can use it. Okay. Now, closed source tools are typically owned by a corporation. You mostly get only the solution and not the original source code with which it is built, and you don't have permissions to either look at it or modify it. Open source is a kind of software where the source code is usually owned by a community, although in many cases it can also be owned by trusts, by organizations, by various other things, sometimes even corporations for that matter. But the crucial part of it is that it's available to be used, inspected, and modified, which means the source code is yours to change if you choose to do it. Now, this has a certain impacts on how it can be used and what it means to you, right? And that is what will be the second part of our discussion. Uh, and usually what people do is they give permission by default through open licenses. So you see the source code, it automatically says that this is available for you to use freely, or not necessarily freely, but you'll probably have to pay a certain amount to somebody, or you have to put our logo in somewhere. Whatever the conditions are written in the license, which means that you don't need to ask permission from somebody. This permission is already given to you. So that's the difference between the closed source and open source. Now the question arises, why does open source software exist? What are people's motivations or intentions when people build open source software? Now I wanted to bring it into two different pieces. The first is, what are the incentives of the builder, the person who writes the open source software, to actually make it open source? A few reasons that I've put here is what came to my mind. There could be others as well. The first reason is the one of the purest. Like, there are people who believe in sharing, and they believe that you should never reinvent the wheel. If somebody has built something, let's build something on top of it, right? So you believe in sharing, you believe in the progress of the world. You could be a purist who says that if I give you the product, then I will give you the source code by default, because you have complete ownership over what I give you, right? So that's one of the reasons. It's relatively less and less becoming relevant in today's world, but again, that is one reason why people write open source. There are a lot of people who do this for social interactions. There are a lot of hobby programmers out there. There are some people who believe that writing open source can actually boost their career, which it does. But that is one reason why somebody might build in the open. There are some people who think that who are a community and they want to share their code, they want to collaborate. Sutantra Malayalam Computing is the example of a group who wants to work on computing related to the Malayalam language, for example. There could be a lot of other people who are interested in a certain area, they want to collaborate with each other, and open source kind of works well. There are some companies, these are not individuals, who want to build goodwill among either their current employees or future employees and future customers. And that is one of the reasons they try to open source or let people work on open source tools at their own time. That's also a very common reason why people do it. Uh, there are a lot of times when what happens is companies feel like they can't build this themselves. They really want to collaborate with other people because it's just too costly to maintain by themselves. And many open source software has been open source because they want community contributions, so that the software itself lives forever, and they need to pay only a fraction of the price in exchange for other people using their software. There is some cases where it will only work if everyone uses it. It's like protocols, ways of communication, and things like that. And there are some people like big corporations like Google, right? They would start thinking, I want to improve the web because the web is my business. My business will not happen if the web does not exist. So they'll build things like Chrome and give it away for free so that everybody has a browser now and it's the fastest possible. People do things like that as well, right? And there are cases where the business model depends on it. Like, there are some people who say that I will give you, they'll build something really huge, let a lot of people use it, and they build consulting services on top of it. There are some people who build a lot of things for free, but have certain small things alone as paid features, which they will give. There are some who just build it for free and charge for hosting. So there are different kinds of business models that work in the open source world and work only if it is open source. And these are the kind of reasons why builders build in the open. Just a small idea of why we at Samanvay, we are a non-profit tech organization. We build tech products. Now, the reason we build it is because what we are doing is grant money, societal funds. So it's not our money that we're using to build it. So it makes sense to actually keep it open source. That's one big reason that why we build open source. And the other things are we are generally lazy, which means that keeping open source is relatively easier than actually making it closed source. And we get a lot of freebies. Like organizations actually give us free licenses and things like that to use if something is open source. We get a lot of freebies, so we're happy with it anyways. It's a secondary reason, but we still do it. Okay, so that is from a builder's perspective. Now, what is the incentive from a consumer? You as a consumer, why should you care about open source? Okay, so let me tell you this through a story. This is basically kind of like a story, my story in the sense that what I've been going through over my lifetime for on different software products, and the story will be differ across people, but this is how it is. So in 2004, OpenMRS, Open Medical Record System, it's an electronic medical record systems, was created somewhere around, and this was an open source product started by a university, and eventually it became really popular, being used across multiple countries. Even like country level medical record systems were built on top of it. Now in 2013, a bunch of us at ThoughtWorks, which is the company, decided to build a hospital information system. Okay, and this was for an NGO. The chairman of ThoughtWorks wanted to build it for free for them, but it still costs a lot of money. So what we did was we took OpenMRS, which is the medical record system. We took a very popular lab information system, and we took a popular ERP, enterprise resource planning software, because all these three things are part of what a hospital management system is. And then all we did was we built the plumbing, which means that whatever we needed was already available, and we just did the plumbing to make it look like a hospital information system, and it worked. It is right now being used by like several hundred hospitals. Now the benefits to us, it was really cheap to build compared to building all these three things by ourselves. And if it's cheap for us to build, it means that the end consumer will also find it cheaper, right? We didn't have to ask permission from either OpenMRS, OpenLS, or Odoo to actually pick their tools and start building it, which reduces a lot of time it takes to actually like collaborate with another organization. And all of these were battle tested software, which means that the small little things that the software has, which you don't know by just looking at them, they would have been already implemented because somebody might have faced a problem sometime in the past and they'd fixed it, and we would not even think that that kind of a problem would exist. So all of these things are actually solved. This is not necessarily true this is true only with open source. It's true with any kind of software. It's always best to use battle tested software as opposed to something that is brand new, which means that if you're building something custom for yourself, it means that you will have to endure a period of stabilization during which you'll find all these new use cases coming in. Okay, so that was about Bumney. In 2015, what we saw was there were other organizations that started coming in and providing support. Like if a new hospital wanted Bumney to be implemented, they said, we will implement Bumney for you. And there was no need to collaborate with the original organization which built it. They just said, oh, they could just approach a hospital and say, I want this built today. And it was possible for them to do it because it is open source. Anybody can start using it. Now you're from one system, now we are getting into an ecosystem, right? Multiple organizations are now coming in. There is competition among it. There's also vendor independence. You could choose one vendor over other for the same product, and you could move your business elsewhere if somebody does not work for you, right? There is competition that happens, and that's in general good from a consumer's perspective. 2016, I kind of stopped working on Bumney and started building something called Avni, which is a community service and data collection platform for nonprofits. Um, so we started working on it for a while. And sometime in 2023, we had to do a government deployment. And this is one piece that I wanted to talk about because now when you have a government deployment, you are right now on the cloud, which probably means that you use certain services which are available only on the cloud. Now we were using S3. S3 is like a file storage mechanism. You could dump gigabytes, terabytes of file in there, and it'll just scale. Similarly, we had you use something called Cognito, which was a authentication system. So it takes care of all your user ID, sign up, sign in, sending reset password messages and things like that. And it didn't work for us. So we kind of swapped that to use open source tools instead. So, and because of that, we could actually do like a government deployment without asking the government to actually pay for a certain license and things like that. So that was one big learning. So and whenever you build also, and if you're thinking of handing it over to the government at a later point of time, if there are tools that are either closed source or if they work only on the cloud, these are certain things that you might have to think about before adopting a platform like that. So that was about the government deployment piece. In 2023, the first product that I talked about, Bumni, took Avni and started using it for their field use cases. So Bumni was a hospital system, but they wanted outreach clinics to use Bumni. So they took Avni and they changed it in a fashion where Avni and Bumni could actually come together. So now you see from 2016 or 2013 when Bumni started to now, they've started integrating multiple things. And this was one use case where you wanted capabilities on the field and you could just pick up a software. They didn't need our permission. They did collaborate with us for a while, but we're improving products and capabilities of products in the open source by collaborating with each other. And that's kind of like the beauty of open source and how things happen in this world. So just summarizing, there is potential cost savings. Don't take this at face value. You have to do your homework before you figure it out. You could have plans like what Nasscom provides, for example. You could have a case where with this, you might not necessarily have a cost savings plan, but that's something that you have to look out for. You have vendor independence, again, something that you have to look at, but there is a possibility that there's vendor independence in what you take. There are lots of plugins and integrations that keep happening over time. And for government handovers, things are relatively easier. Um, so these are kind of the incentives for a consumer. Now, this is all theory, right? In some sense, because this is all what I noticed. I wanted to go through like a video now, in which NGOs themselves kind of speak about it. There are two videos. I'll just play one of them, and I'll share this presentation so that you can watch the rest later. Before going through the video, so this is from A.T. Chandra Foundation, somebody who's been using some of our products. And this is a video in which we were asking why uh, whether there is a specific idea around open source that they believe. If we let this continue for the next 4 minutes, I guess.
Vinay, we can't hear the video.
Oh, okay. I don't know how to fix that. Let me do this. I'll keep this aside. But I'll share the presentation and you can basically look at it later.
Excellent.
Uh, uh, but the basic idea behind this, at least what Amrita here was saying, is that they they're a relatively bigger NGO, and the idea behind that is that they want to keep improving the tech ecosystem so that everybody else can also benefit from what they are building, and that's essentially what they were trying to mention here. I'll just stop at that, and maybe you can watch the video at a later point in time. Okay, let me move on. So till now we've been talking about uh, the what and the why, and now we'll get into the how. And before going through this, one thing is that the decision to either use open source or closed source is not straightforward. And I think you should always look at it from an organization standpoint rather than uh, say whether I choose this because it's open source or choose this because it's closed source. You should always evaluate both of them, look at it from both a short term as well as a long term perspective, and see what works for you. Uh, that okay. With that aside, let's talk about what you're going to build. So you could either be building a general purpose software. I mean, what are your needs, right? Your need could be a general purpose software. You could have something for accounting, CRM, websites, email, document storage, like things like this are already solved and commoditized, right? You have open source software as well as closed source software available for all of this. There are a bunch of open source alternatives that I've given at the bottom here, but at the same time, the decision of which one to go will completely depend upon what works best for you from a requirement standpoint. Now, there are also non-profit specific problems, right? Now, what happens is when you come to non-profit specific problems, the market becomes really, really small. Like, for example, only 0.1% of the entire Indian IT market is non-profits. A very, very rough guess would be around 2,400 crores, which is very small for actually creating something like an ERP Next or Odoo as a for-profit company. So what happens is a lot of philanthropies actually start funding software. If you look at so I have given a link here. It's called the Digital Public Goods Registry. Now, you'll notice that almost every software in there was actually built through philanthropy and not directly through a regular private company. And the reason for this is very clear. It's because you don't really have the market size to justify building a product in this space in most scenarios, at least. No, this is not necessarily true for everyone, but it is the 90% scenario. So that's the non-profit specific. So you will not find anything in the market. You can potentially choose from this registry. If it works for you, awesome. If it doesn't work for you, then you'll probably have to build it. And there's also organization specific. Like, for example, you want to build a website that is very specific to your organization, right? Those kind of things you'll obviously not find anything in the open source world. You'll find stuff that will help you get there. Like, for example, you have a Joomla or a WordPress which will help you get there. The final website itself is something you'll have to build for yourself, right? So that aside, so that's about the three kinds of software. And the strategy you choose for general purpose will be different from what you choose for your own industry, will be very different from what you choose for your organization. And typically, open source, closed source, you can choose within as general purpose. If it's non-profit specific, you only have open source software mostly. And when it's organization specific, you have to build this by yourself. Although in a lot of times you should actually look for other organizations who have built it and see if there's something that you can actually reuse. Um, when you want to do, you have to do a typical software evaluation. So when you look at products, always look for an 80% alignment, because what happens is if you look at your needs and all your must-have needs are solved, then for the rest of it, and there are some cases where you might need a workaround and things like that. But if you want to get the entire 100%, usually it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And if you want to build that 20%, it will cost you a lot more than what you would get for that 80%. So look at your needs very carefully. If you are choosing an open source product, you'll have to look at the ecosystem, which means one is you could look at the website itself. You could look at the source code activity. You could look at community vendors and things like that. And I'll show you how we can do this. You have to look at the cost. You have to look at the uh, so when you look at the cost, there are a lot of things. It is not just the cost of the software. You have to look at the initial configuration cost, ongoing maintenance. Whenever something like 1 year later you want to change the program, how much would something like that cost? You will need internal staffing. You need a staff who would talk to whomever is going to be building this building or configuring this software for you. And they would also need to be talking to everybody who's using the software. So there is some staffing involved. There might be hosting hardware, the time spent by leadership. You'll have to think about who owns the data if you use the software. You'll have to look at the where it's held. Like for example, especially for those in the clinical space, you need to make sure that PII does not go outside India. You have to look at how the security of the software is. These are different things that you'll have to look at. And for NGO specifically, you'll have to put this in your budget and to your funder request so that it has the right kind of numbers in there. You can use any software evaluation checklist that kind of helps you with all of these things and much more. That is one way you can evaluate. Do not specifically look for open source versus closed source. Look at all the options, but again, remember the previous thing that if it is non-profit specific, there's a very high chance that if it's there in that registry, and if it's not there in the registry, it probably does not exist, but do a Google search irrespective of that. And if you need to build it, if you think there's something for your industry that you need to build it, one is you have to consider the cost. Like if you have a commodity like a Gmail or something like that, it costs you 1 rupee. If it's a configurable product such as say a Joomla or a WordPress, it will cost you 10 times what it costs for a commodity. And if you want to build a custom solution, it will cost about 1,000 times more. That's like a very rough rule of thumb. This 1,000 can become 500, 200. It's still like a good rule of thumb to go with. You have to consider the risk of failure. If you're building it yourself, there is a chance that it might not really work out in the end. And the third is that if it is reusable, if it is for your industry really, and if you think it's not there, then consider open sourcing a solution, because you need to keep, like in this world, as I told, the amount of money is really low, which means that you have to try to build one on top of the other and get the entire ecosystem one step ahead at a time. A small note about SaaS. SaaS is basically software as a service, and this is where you have solutions which are hosted on the cloud that you can sign up and use. I'm sure you would have a lot of you have would have seen this for a lot of tools nowadays. This is the way the world is going nowadays. People don't. Sometime in 2010, people would be installing software on their own servers in their own locations. It doesn't happen that much nowadays. And as a nonprofit, some of the things you should think about is that you have a very small team, and all of this is focused on operations and actually providing the value that you're providing. And even in the software industry, it's very hard to keep tech talent in the company. And as a person who is not in the tech industry, it will be really hard one to hire, and once you hire, to make sure that they stay for a long time. We've seen some companies kind of succeed with it, but it's more exceptions rather than the rule. It's a And even if you do, right, if you have 5 different tech products, it's a stretch for them to actually start learning all of this and start using them, like being good at all of them themselves. And overall cost of ownership, what we've seen, can potentially be higher than what you use SaaS. This is a this is something that I noticed across multiple organizations. Typically, what SaaS does is, right. So imagine there is some kind of a software, can be open source, closed source, doesn't really matter. Um, what they do is they host this thing on a server. They take care of all the upgrades that the software comes with. They take care of your data security. They take care of problems. If you have a problem, they'll help you support it and things like that. And what they do is they will charge you for all these services that they provide, which is very similar to you hiring a specific person to handle everything that your organization needs. Um, so that's what you get. Usually they take care of where the hosting region is, security standards. They'll have data redundancy. If something is wrong here, they can take a backup from elsewhere and start using it. And So you have to validate that these things are true though. If you are using a SaaS solution, make sure it is in the right place, make sure the security standards are decent enough. You have data redundancy, they have the right kind of backups in place, and you have the ability to take your data out in case you want to. These are certain things you'll have to make sure is available before you sign up for a SaaS solution, especially if it's very core to what you need. So summary, and there are some interesting links as I'll share later. Actually, yeah. If you look at the QR code on the right hand side, you can get a link to this document, which means you can go through the videos as well as the documents as much as you want. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope I'm still on the call.
Yes, thank you, Vinay. Thank you really so much. Uh, I think I would like to take few questions. Um, there's one question about like, do we know of any conference or meeting tools which can be integrated into a React native mobile application for an NGO? So you have to tell me what is React native mobile application actually, Ashutosh Raina.
When I can, this is getting into too much of a technical detail though. Uh,
This is
there is, we've actually used this Jitsi, which has a React plugin that can be used.
a hybrid app.
Oh, you're talking about hybrid.
Hybrid app, yeah.
Yeah. Jitsi is the only thing that I am aware of, Ashutosh.
Okay. Um, any opinion about using open source desktop effectively on Linux, Mint, LibreOffice, Thunderbird, any other useful software options?
Using open source.
Yeah, any open source desktop effectively.
So I'm on a Mac, by the way. I'm not using a Linux machine at all. It's just because of the power of like the computing power has changed so much for a Mac. So I'm exclusively Linux. But when I used to use Linux, it's mostly about command line tools, not really the desktop tools. So all, at least, and this is a personal thing, right? So for me, most of my docs have been Google Docs, which essentially means no LibreOffice, no Thunderbird. Uh, so yeah.
There's a very broad question, and I don't know you'll be able to answer. It's like what all open source apps are currently available for NGOs and where does one find them? I mean, I know it's very
So I had no. So I'd given a list, right?
Hmm.
I'd given a link in the presentation. So it is specifically meant for open source for the NGO ecosystem, really. I can paste that link here as well. Uh, so there is the digital public goods repository, which usually has non-profit specific tools. And this is basically run by the UN, and they want to promote more collaboration for open source in this ecosystem.
Okay.
Gayatri, just yeah,
I'll take
Gayatri
two or
in
three
this
live
list.
questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
sorry, Vinny, please go ahead.
no. So Gayatri just said it's in the presentation, so I just shared it.
Um, yeah, okay, I'll take one live question. It's Pavan. Yes, Pavan, please unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So so we are also a non-profit organization. So we just recently get started our pilots in drone images. Okay, we are flying drones, and there's a lot of data has been generated from drones. It is growing from time to time. The size of the data, drone images, and we are not I mean, it is very expensive for us to store that data. So we are looking for a space where we can put our data there, so the others also can access the data for a larger agenda, for larger purpose, other purposes. So is there any option so that we will keep, so in, say for example, the amount of data would be around 2 TB in the next 3 years, approximately. So are there any sources so that we'll keep our data there so that we and others can access that data?
Are you particular about open source, Pawan?
Yes, open source. I'm looking for
No, open
space.
source in the
And there are also applications in a drone related image processing. There are two things. So open source applications for processing the drone images. Second thing is the images we keep in a storage space where we keep the data images so that everybody can have access to those data.
yeah. So from a storage perspective, right? So I had initially mentioned about moving of S3 to Minio, right? So the reason why we didn't use Minio is that we didn't have to deal with getting all those disks and making sure delivery is fine and things like that. So at least on Avni's cloud offering, we use S3, and S3 is very, very simple to use. Right now, I'm guessing we have around a terabyte worth of data, and we're paying somewhere close to $25 a month, which is like from a like from a pure storage perspective, I think that's the easiest or the cheapest option that I know of. So you don't have
S3,
to worry about
S3,
cloud. S3, yeah,
S3,
Amazon
yes.
S3. Because
Okay.
all of this is mainly about hardware, right? It's not really about the software. You have to have a case where you have scalable hardware that you can use. Like so from that perspective, I think that's the best option that I can think of. We had to replace that with Minio for like a government deployment, but that doesn't look like, from an individual perspective, that doesn't really work very well, right? Uh, but I mean, software, though, you can, I don't know what kind of image processing you do. So I'm hoping the software itself will be related to what your specific need is, right?
Yeah.
All right, Pawan, thanks. Sunil, uh, can you please unmute?
Hi, thank you, Atik. Vinay, one of the questions that I have is for solutions as simple as mail IDs. Currently, the only solution available is paying 1,500 rupees per user per year, which is
Yeah.
obviously very expensive. And we have 200 people in the organization, so it certainly goes to 3 lakh rupees a year, which is impossible. Are there any other better solutions for having our own domain ID mail? Rather than depending on these 1,500 rupee solutions. Thank you.
Sure. So there are open source options, but the problem with these open source options, at least in today's world, is that your email will not reach your consumer, will reach your recipient. And this has to do a lot to do with how Google and Microsoft and other email providers actually think about email, right? And they are very, very ruthless when it comes to dealing with much, much smaller organizations. And that makes creating your own email pretty much impossible in today's world. So the software exists, but the overall infrastructure does not allow you to send and receive emails. That is the issue that exists, at least in the ecosystem today. So there are a bunch of people in I don't know if you've heard of FOSS United. So it's like a group where people speak quite a lot about how to manage their own email, and a lot of people have tried every single possibility and they failed. So they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just going to like use one of the cloud providers and get done with
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Vinay.
Yeah. Anyone else want to ask a question? Please raise your hands. Yeah, Ashutosh, can you please unmute? You can take this one
Venu, we
question.
yeah. So the question is, I think you gave the list. Thank you for that. But the question really is that what you're talking about your own initiative. Is there a way that we work with education for kids at village levels? Samarth is the name of the organization which I represent, by the way, and we are thinking of doing some collaborations between uh, keeping the whole ecosystem of that village into our workings. Now, obviously, I can't do everything on my own. I want to focus on education, which is our forte, and we have got around 272 villages in Maharashtra and Gujarat, where we are working right now. So I want to collaborate with other individuals or organizations who are working in different areas so that we can give one-stop solution to those villages. Now, is there a way we can, or is there a medium through Nasscom Foundation where we can do that? And if there is, so can you point me to the right direction?
I guess the question is to Nasscom Foundation. RP Mahindra, would you like to respond?
So, I think Ashutosh, if I'm understanding this right, what you're saying is you have certain things from an education perspective as a footy, and you want to look at from perspective of how to manage your daily operations or things which is helpful for you to run your organization. Am I right in understanding that?
That is a part of it. No, I want to go further than that, Mahendra. Thank you for that. I want to go further than that. So education is what we take care of. There might be somebody who
Mm-hmm.
is doing something in, say, for example, medical field,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody doing something for the farming field. Now, is there a way where we can collaborate using NASCOM's foundation?
Okay. See, I think just to answer this in two parts. The part one is I think when we look at the Big Tech as a program, we work with NGO community and we provide certain softwares which are relevant for the NGOs from a technology and IT perspective, right? Which the NGOs can go ahead and adopt and start to utilize them for their respective organizations. The second part of it is like, do we have certain repository of which NGOs are working in which areas and how they can collaborate with other NGOs. Unfortunately, we don't do that. But we kind of bring in this kind of common synergy programs where we can invite the NGOs for in-person events and we try and see what problem areas which they have and how we can provide certain solutions to it. So that those are some of the things which we do, but we don't have any ready things which we can go and refer to.
Hmm. Okay, Mahendra, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Means I
All
might have to
right.
talk again in future, but thank you for that
Yeah.
small part. Yeah,
Sure.
thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Ashutosh. All right, great. I think in the interest of time, I think we'll stop here. Thank you very much, Vinay. I'm hoping that this session was very helpful for the NGOs, especially to understand what is open source. And I like the way you said wow, what, why, and when. I think that's the way we are trying to look at it, and I'm hopeful that the NGOs can, start to look at some of the solutions which you have also provided as ready-made. So. Thank you very much again, Vinay, and I'm hoping that the NGOs can utilize this particular session. And I think you have already shared the QR code to the presentation, which I think they will be looking at it. And all the participants who have joined, if you have any questions further related to this or the presentation, please feel free to drop an email to bigtech.nascomfoundation.org at the rate org. So I think that's where we can see how we can address certain questions which are related and we can keep in touch with Vinay and get the responses if there is any further questions, right? With that, thank you again. Thanks, Vinay. Thanks, Aarti. Thanks, everyone.